Okay, this video is about how memory works, and we're really focusing on the research work of James McGaugh. James McGaugh was born in 1931, so he's in his 90s. He's still alive. He was a neuroscience professor at University of California, Irvine. That's Orange County, Los Angeles. And basically, the Los Angeles, Southern California area was sort of a golden age of neuroscience from about 1970 to 2010. UC California, UC means University of California. Loma Linda was fantastic for neuroscience, and UCLA had good neuroscientists, neuroradiologists, so did neurosurgeons, so did UC San Diego. Okay, and he's like Nobel Prize caliber neuroscientist, this guy James McGaugh. He says, of all the things the brain does, the most important thing is to make and maintain memories. The purpose of memory is to make predictions. And he quotes Francis Bacon in 1620, who said, memory is assisted by anything that makes an impression on a powerful passion, okay? Inspiring fear or wonder or shame or joy. So basically, the point of that is anything that activates us emotionally gets us to remember something better. Because our emotions tell our brain this is important. And when you have an emotional response to something, that means you get a mini stress response. And you get an elevation of the hormones cortisol. Cortisol goes to your adrenal glands, releases glucocorticoids like cortisol. ACTH comes from your hypothalamus, goes to your adrenals, releases cortisol. That activates the release of more glutamate in your brain to increase the synaptic action potential, okay, to activate your memory. Then you also release more epinephrine. So the epinephrine comes from your adrenals. It activates actually the vagal nerve, and that stimulates your brain too. Your hippocampus is activated by all this as well. Your emotional response. So an increased emotional response means increased memory. Okay, and that reminds me of the quote by Ezra Pound, the American poet. He said, only emotion endures. And the relevance of all this is think about how somebody teaches. Well, I'll come to that in a moment, but just remember this. If you want somebody to remember something, you make it emotional. Okay? Okay, next a quote by Rene Descartes. He says, the usefulness of all the passions consists in their strengthening and prolonging in the soul the thoughts which are good for it to conserve. Yeah. Your emotions tell you when something's important, okay? So we remember things that are important to us, things that we care about, things that we are interested in. Okay, this is my quote. Emotional stuff causes a mini stress response with an increase in cortisol and catecholamines, and this amplifies the memory. That's a big part of why Socratic method of teaching can improve memory, by questioning with Socratic dialogue as you work towards the truth through a series of questions. Okay, Dr. McGaugh, in his own research, he showed that you can strengthen memory. And here's his picture. I'm going to show you a diagram from his research right here. Actually, let me just explain the diagram right now because this is worth, you might want to hit the print screen button for this one. So when you hear something that emotionally is interesting, your learning experience, you get a release of hormones from the brain that cause the adrenal gland to release cortisol, glucocorticoids. That has an effect on the brain to increase glutamate at your synapses, like in your hippocampus, your memory center, to strengthen the memory. The epinephrine activates your amygdala, which is sort of like your emotional center, especially for fear. And that will also strengthen the memory trace, the amount of neurotransmitter released. So that gets you to remember something, okay? And the relevance of all this is if you want to give a presentation, try to put something emotional in it. If you want people to remember it, okay, and he would do all kinds of things, like as soon as they would give stimulus to an animal and they wanted to increase its memory of the event, they would then immediately following that give them some epinephrine. And if they wanted to block the memory, they would immediately following give them a beta blocker like propanolol. Okay. They also, did a craniotomy, and then they would put a little wire on the amygdala, and they could give it a little stimulation right after the teaching event, and the animal would remember it better. You could inject norepinephrine directly on the brain. Epinephrine in the periphery, but norepi in the CNS, central nervous system. Okay. The amount of norepi in the amygdala has the strongest correlation with the strength of memory to anything that he's found. So the amygdala is the fear center. We remember things we're afraid of, danger, more than we remember positive things. If you inject people with epinephrine, this is what humans, immediately after they hear a story, they remember it better. If you put your hand in a bucket of ice water, that will increase epinephrine. So you could do that immediately after to get somebody to remember something, but that's a little bit crazy. And what I would also say, the correlate to this is think about when you had a good teacher. I remember I had this one great teacher my second year of medical student in pathology, And I thought the guy was just fantastic. The best teacher I had in med school. Dr. Kirschenbaum was his name, okay? And I told my dad, I go, Dad, he's such a great teacher. I feel like I finally understand everything in pathology. It's great. I really like going to his class. And my father said, you're going to remember that guy the whole rest of your life. I'm like, what are you talking about, Dad? There'll be lots of great professors and teachers. My dad goes, nope. The number of great professors and teachers you will encounter your entire academic career will be about the number you can count on one hand, if you're lucky. And he's actually kind of right, because most professors look at teaching as a hassle, and they just kind of, read the pages of the book. They try to be comprehensive. They're real mediocre. A real good teacher is somebody who really likes the subject and enjoys teaching. And they're kind of theatrical, kind of dramatic, which is good, because that creates emotion. So you're more likely to remember it. They put it into a story, so it makes more sense. It's coherent. It's easier to get that into your head. Some of them will tell jokes. That's memorable. Some of them will come up with good metaphors. That's memorable. Some of them will show you good images. That's memorable. You yourself can do things with walk and talk, make a mnemonic, or they'll teach you a mnemonic. That will help. Getting a good night's sleep that night improves your memory. Avoiding other things that stress you and distract you improves your memory. Word associations help. Making rhymes help. Making a drawing of it helps. Sometimes you need to use, little tricks like the letter number alphabet or the memory palace tricks. It depends on what it is. A lot of things like pharmacology or stimulus response, or like learning vocabulary for foreign languages or something. But anyways, I thought this was kind of cool. The biological basis of memory. Okay. There's also the concept of long-term potentiation, but I think you get my point. This having emotion increases memory, and then all these other things help too. So hope you found that helpful.